Hey, how's it going? My name is Christopher C. Lee, founder of Photomochi Studio, and these are my top colleagues, Ryan Saracool and Peter Murillo. How are you guys doing today?
Good, man. Thank you for having us.
Yeah. One thing that's trending in real estate videos is tours of the home. The standard way to do it is to have like an intro and outro with the realtors, and then you showcase the house. A lot of the videos are pretty simple. People are just kind of walking around the house. One thing that I did to kind of add my little touch to it is we choreographed what we were gonna do. So for example, the agent greets us to follow her. I follow her through the entrance, and then once we're in the house, we have a set of different things that we're gonna do. So when she got to the living room, she had a bottle of wine, she placed it down.
Sick.
We got to the kitchen, she's just going over the quartz countertop. We get to the room, she's fluffing the pillows. But one thing to kind of make the video interesting, don't show her the entire time. So there'll be times where I pan in, I'm in the living room, she's looping around behind me, running to the room, setting up, that way when I get to the room, she's ready, she's fluffing the pillow, and then we continue the video. And so this is all one take.
I think that's really dope to have like so much planning that by the time you're done planning, you have the full setup for a one take. I think that saves you a lot of time too. Agreed,
because I found myself often just wasting a lot of time trying to get like, shoot the living room and then shoot the kitchen instead of just like choreographing everything and just one take.
So my background in videography comes from freestyle dancers. So I know how to read movements really well. I choreograph either like if the frame is here, I would have people walk either past or behind or something to create depth. Thing that I try to focus on is how do I keep someone's attention span captivated? Most of the time when people watch stuff, they don't really know why they're captivated or why they're continuing to watch if you don't really understand the director's standpoint, right? So when I do dance videos, I will try to listen for sound in the song that stands out. And usually I would give them a pathway. So let's say we're dancing in this room. I'd be like, all right, first you're gonna get up from the couch. As you get up, then you're gonna move to the next couch. You're gonna go around the table. Then you're gonna walk through this way. You're gonna do a move here to this part of the song. When this part comes up, you're gonna say, follow me. And then you walk to the next part.
There you go.
So some things happen.
There's like cues. Right. It's a very dynamic scene.
Right. I love one takes the most because there's a magic in one take. Yeah. It's a whole flow. It's a chemistry that needs to happen. So as you're watching it too, you feel like you're almost like you're there, but cinematically. You know, so that's kind of my approach as well. So I thought it was really interesting.
Very interesting that you say that most of the time people don't know why they're captivated.
Right.
That's a very fun statement to explore. To rephrase that, the question is like, what makes something look right? What is that golden ratio? You know, what is that like beauty that really captivates people? Every artist has a propensity towards that, where they want to achieve that greatest beauty that they can capture. It's almost mystical. It's like you want to have the greatest lighting, you want to have the greatest composition, you want to also be creative and create something unique and different. And sometimes both the artist and the client, they don't even know what like they're actually ultimately going to end up with, but then they try to do it anyway, they figure it out along the way, and then they create a work of art.
That's why I think it's very important with who you work with. There's a point where you're working for the arts and you're working for the bag. Yeah. And oftentimes when you work for the bag, it's less like, you can still make great, amazing, commercial, phenomenal cinematic work.
Yes. But just know that it's like, oh, my talent's for hire, right?
Exactly.
It's like, this is like a talent for hire kind of thing.
Right. It's like a spec work for you, and you're hiring me because I showed you that I can do this.
Yeah. So it's sort of like you're buying a car at a dealership. Someone else can buy a car at a private seller's garage, right? And the way it's presented is different. The private seller, he could be very knowledgeable and he could have like a personal passion. So can the dealership, but it's like a different presentation, because the dealership, it's like you're there like you're at a shopping center and you're going to buy a car, and that's how they present the car. Versus like the private seller who is like, oh, this is my baby, I've tuned it, I've done work on it. And so they have a different approach to like selling their car, right? And that's kind of like how it is to selling your work. Do you talk to the artist in someone, or do you talk to the business in someone?
For me, it's been a little bit linear because, for example, with real estate, every home is different, but the types of photos are the same. Again, you have an intro, you have an outro, the B-roll of the home, and then that's it. So what can I do outside of that? And so for me, it's been about finding my way to get creative with the properties. And so a lot of it even is just like the way you shoot the drone shots, or the way you come in and you shoot the bathroom and the kitchen, and kind of just like adding that little detail. That way, when someone else sees it, it just stands out.
Right. They know it's a signature. I think everyone develops a signature style once they do something so much that even if you're like not necessarily passionate about what you're filming, but you're passionate about the topic of what you're doing, which would be videography in this case, then naturally you're going to want to find a way to make the way you shoot things stand out.
It's only when you're doing something you're passionate about, it could be the genre of photography or videography, that's when you grow there the fastest. Sports photography is your thing, right? That's where it's like, if you keep doing sports photography, you're going to keep wanting to do something unique and creative with it because you love doing it. A lot of the times when I'm talking to a contractor, right, that's working with me for the first time, when they ask me what is the best way for them to grow, I always tell them to start with something that they love doing, the type of photography that they like doing the most. Because they'll present to me like, okay, well, I need to do everything. And then they do a little bit of everything and they're like, oh my God, there's so much stuff. I'm like burning out. Sometimes they confuse the burnout for like, this isn't for me, which is like the worst, right? Because when they start saying like, this isn't for me, that's when they quit. And it's like, well, you were a pretty good photographer. So like, if you wanted to, you could make it, but you just didn't do that process right. Always keep doing what you love doing because you never know, right? Like you might get really good at it one day.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I learned a lot of my lessons in life on what it means to like love something and be passionate about something and to persevere through dance, you know, because I grew up like doing competitive dancing. It's weird. It's like a Shark Tank where everyone's like trying to be something, being individual. It's like you really got to find what matters to you and how you want to continue to do something and learn and develop, right? And that, you know, eventually growing up translated into camera stuff, like anything camera related, you know, and it keeps your mind open. Because there are a lot of people that, for example, in dance would come up to me and be like, I wish I had more time for dance. I had to stop dancing because like I need to work, you know. And there are people who used to videograph us from back then that I would look up to. Now they haven't touched the camera, you know, and I would be like, why? And, you know, because it's like what you said, right? Where it's like, you need to ask yourself, like, what is it about this thing that I do that I really love? Just keep going, you know, even if you think your work is bad, well, you're going to naturally want to improve because you just like doing it. Like you said, you want to do something that you can do every day. Sometimes people get into things for the wrong reason, or sometimes people don't have the patience or the passion to persevere through what they're pursuing. So that's really what makes it or breaks it for somebody. Also,
yeah, and it could be the right thing for the wrong reason. So it's like they would have loved it if they did it right.
A lot of the times too, you know, people go into it for, let's say, the wrong reason, like you said, let's say vanity. And at first it starts off like great, but then down the line it becomes like a hassle and it becomes like a task. And then that's when people begin to lose that feel for it. And for me, for example, the reason I wanted to get into, you know, photography and videography was just when I was growing up, growing up and seeing how technology was evolving. For me, it was so interesting to see how a phone can just document everything. And so for me, it was about like kind of eventually going into the idea of like documenting my own life for personal reasons, like family, and down the line be able to create something. And now that I'm like now that I've fully dove into this industry, it's more about like, what can I create within all these other niches? Because I mean, you specialize in dance, I shoot a lot of real estate and sports, but we still do a little bit of everything. And it's interesting that you said what you said earlier about kind of losing that touch if you're not focusing on your niche. And it's true, because when I first started, I was all over the place. And it took some time for me to kind of condense what I wanted to shoot, but I needed to get in those hours. So for me, it was like, whatever I can pick up, it's like, let's just go and let's just do it. But now I'm in that position where I can kind of condense things and focus on what I want to create. And that's where I feel like as a creator, you're really winning at that point.
Right. I remember my first goal was like, I quit my job and I was like, I'm gonna pursue videography. And my first goal was like, I'm gonna make my whole monthly paycheck in one gig. And I'm gonna be like, in your fucking dude face. I made it, right?
Yeah, and then like the day after you quit your job, you're like, what do I do with all this time? Time management.
Yeah, because you become your own boss.
Yeah, when you work for yourself as an entrepreneur, time management is gigantic because every second counts. Right.
Literally.
It's hard, in the beginning, it's really hard. Yeah.
And you know that you have to stay productive. But before you can be productive, you have to figure out what productive even means.
Exactly. For you, right? Especially for you, yeah.
You can't just be doing busy work like, it's just answering emails for the sake of answering emails, but it's like, who are those emails going to? Right. What are those emails getting you? Are you replying to the right clients? Right. Are you putting the right quotes? Right. Right. Are you packaging your services correctly?
All that.
Right. All of that is part of the process, because the magazines will say he quit his job, he dropped out of high school, and then boom, now he's here. Yeah. And they don't tell you what happens in between when he like figures out all this shit. That part they want to skip over. They want to get to the shine.
Interesting thing about what you said is that I think that's the best part for me, because I want to relate to something that's real. I want to know that, like, and I remember when I first met you again, so, just for the viewers out there, camera up C. Just for the viewers out there, I met Chris over 10 years ago. 10 years ago, like 10 years ago, right? And then he asked me to help be a model for a fashion show, because he used to own a clothing brand of his own.
This is not a plug.
It's not a plug. It's True Wear. It's a plug. Go buy his stuff. And then
very natural and candid.
So, at the time, I was still a school teacher and a full-time like dancer. I was traveling the world, battling and everything like that at the time. And I was like, 24 maybe? And Chris was a little younger than me, 23, I believe 22 or something like that, right?
Still younger than you.
Still younger than me, a little bit.
That didn't change.
Yeah, that didn't change. Like, I was always catching up to me.
Making sure you know that.
I got it. So, at the time, Chris was doing clothing and not camera work. Or he was doing camera work, but I didn't know him for that yet. And then I found him on Instagram, and we had reached out to each other, and I met him. And the first thing I asked him, we sat down. He was like asking me about dance and stuff. But in my head, I'm like, nah, bro, I see you. I see what you're doing. I'm trying to do that too. So I remember the first conversation we had. I sat down. The first thing I said was, "How did you get here? Like, what did you do?" He told me about his journey and how he got here, and my journey from becoming just a guy with a camera to a guy getting gigs to a freelancer to someone building a business. It's a very difficult curve, because you have to be disciplined. You have to learn a lot of things. You have to give up time. You have to learn the time management for yourself, your friends, your family, your business, your health, everything, your hobbies, your passion, all this stuff. But on top of that, what people don't get is, like, you could be a skillful artist, but you could not understand a damn thing about business. And then you think you're the shit. Like, I got this guy who came up to me recently, right? And he goes, "For the work you just did and the amount of money you got paid, like, I don't think you should have got paid that much." And I was like, "I don't think you knew how to write a proposal. That's your problem. I don't think you know how to do cold calls or reach out to people or understand how to get leads or talk to companies, design a contract, any of that."
It's a whole like pre-production process.
There is a huge difference between a man with $1 million and $1 million man. And the $1 million man is the guy that goes through everything, and he's worth $1 million no matter what, because his experiences, everything that Chris just said, everything that we're talking about, it's a sense of understanding the self-awareness and the mastery of self, right? Which is an ongoing journey, versus a dude with $1 million. Because the dude with $1 million will show up with a Sony A1 and all his like crazy gear, and he has another R5 and he has a FX3 on his head. He's like just shooting bullshit,
Huge difference when you know what you're doing, so you bring the necessary things.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Okay, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
Like, it's not about the amount that you could bring a whole truckload, right? But it's like, do you have a plan for those things?
Right.
Or are you just bringing them because you're insecure and you're afraid that if you don't bring all these backup tools, you're gonna fuck up the shoot.
Mm-hmm. People often over obsess on gear sometimes,
Hella.
which we're all guilty of it, right?
Hella.
Yeah.
There's so much.
We have the lens lust, yes.
So much gear out there, and it's just insane.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think people over obsess sometimes, instead of just like Chris said, it's just like, what do you actually need for this shoot?
Absolutely.
So a lot of times we get carried away with gear. We say, "That's a nice camera." Okay, how many of you guys have had clients that looked the photos, they loved it, and they're like, "That's a great camera, man."
Yeah, bro.
It's like a compliment, but It's also like an insult.
Yeah, no, it's funny because like Chris actually shared a photo from a Japanese photographer. It was gorgeous, right? And then I went to go look at his gear, and it said shot on a Sony A7 III, which is what I shoot on. I love my A7 III. It takes great photos. You know, he has an A7 III, right?
A7 III,
It takes great video. I mean, of course, it has its crippling points, right? But it's like that photo he posted was exceptional. And I was like, that has to be like an R4 or something, right? Or like on some G Master or something, right? And I looked at his stats, and I was like, that guy's just a good photographer.
It's just interesting to see, you know, I mean, one, the shift that technology has taken, but two, how really it's not about the gear and how we keep saying it's really about, you know, the knowledge that you have about the gear and how to use it, right? And
Yes.
If people argue over smartphone cameras and professional cameras, they're not asking the right question, right? It was never about smartphones versus a DSLR tech. Like the technology is not what we're arguing about here. We're arguing about your artistry. So you can use a smartphone, you can use a DSLR, but what are you creating? What's the photograph? Because the photograph is the point. It's not whether you took it with this iPhone or a DSLR, right? So you should never shame or blame anyone for the tool that they use to create the photograph. Right. Whatever it is they're using, look at the result. Like, what did they just make? Right. That's more of the point. Right?
Also, you have to weigh out two key factors: is knowledge and experience as well, right? Because we could know the same thing, we could do the same thing, but let's say, for example, let's say I do Rembrandt lighting, right? I love Rembrandt lighting because it's one of the first things I learned. I was like, oh my God, I got a little triangle under his eyeball. You know, and then if Chris does Rembrandt lighting, right? We could do the same Rembrandt lighting, but more than likely, he may have more experience than me shooting Rembrandt lighting. He might have shot like 10,000 more Rembrandt lighting shots than me, which means that he is better at that. He is more knowledgeable in different types of lighting than that. Maybe somebody takes a great shot, it's great frame, great contrast, great shadows, but has very shitty hair light. And it's just like, well, you know, if you just push that back like a few degrees, that will pop a lot more. Always that fine line where it's like better, different, experienced, or knowledgeable. So I kind of juggle between these things, and I just try to respect everyone's work.
All right, so that wraps up this episode of the Photomochi Show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Once again, I am Christopher C. Lee.
Ryan Zaragool.
Peter Murillo.
And we will catch you on the next one.